All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's Thursday again. It's usually how the calendar works. We have another edition of the MSP Initiative Live. We bring back a familiar face from last year in the new year here, Mr. Billy Austin from RocketCyber. Billy, what's cooking, buddy?
24 hours of solid labor, my friend. Good to be here.
24 hours. I mean, listen, does the day even just like condensed into 24 hours anymore? Are you sure it's not 28, 24, 26, 30?
Yeah, no, there's not enough time there's actually not enough time in the day. And I tell you what, sometimes I feel like I get my best work done at 11 o'clock at night. So
Oh yeah,
yeah,
100%. I agree
good,
with you.
good to be back with you again, George.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I was actually just out in Texas this past week. Great state of Texas. So I loving to see that people are out and about safely, but out, which is good. Feels like things might be, not so under lock and key like it was before.
Yeah, I heard we missed each other by 3 hours. Were you in Fort Worth?
Yeah, Fort Worth. Yeah,
That's where I was at. I was actually at Joe T. Garcia's as well.
we were just there too.
Yeah, just
That's a
missed
great.
you.
That's a great spot.
One of my favorite Mexican food restaurants in all of Dallas Fort Worth.
Yeah, it's a shame because I wish somebody told me it was a cash place. I would have paid myself some ATM fees, but what are you gonna do?
Yeah, well,
At least it's not the casino ATM fees where it's like $30 to take out 20 $20.
yeah. Did they make you wash dishes?
No, no. Had enough. Believe it or not, I had enough ATM cards to to cover the bill.
Yeah, no, that's good. No, they're
I suggested that they should higher their limit on their machine now.
yeah. No, they have some of the best frozen margaritas, and I don't know if you had the luxury of tasting one of those, but people make the
I think
drive all over.
I'm not a big margarita guy. The table got a pitcher or two, but I'm a beer guy and can't help but take advantage of some of those Texas beers that we don't get up here in PA. So,
Yeah.
just jumped right on in.
Well, historically, I used to always order a Corona Light there, but I've had enough Corona for the year, so.
Oh yeah, I got you.
Yeah,
Shiner or two doesn't hurt, right?
yeah. No, that's
There
good.
you go. So, feel like every other day there's a headline, right? This year so far, we've had Sonic Wall the other day, right? We had SolarWinds right at the beginning of the year. I feel like there's a two front campaign, if that's the best way to present it. The tools and the technology we rely on to deliver what we do in the MSP space to the end customers that we support. And then the big box providers that everybody are relying on, right? Every day just to live, right? Because they become such household names. And then you throw in the mix in the middle of all of that, just cleaning up your own house, right? We've talked a lot with, along the way about, hey, security should start within the MSP first, because if their back door's open, it's just basically a house of cards, right?
Yeah.
So let's touch on what, number one, give us your overarching feeling on the fact that we're 28 days into 2021. The calendar switch didn't quite just make everything rosy and rainbows for whatever everybody thought that was going to be, especially in our space. So what's your feeling so far? I mean, expected, surprised, the rest of the year is only going to be the same or worse? Like what's your general feel as somebody in the security space?
Yeah, it's I've been at it for almost 3 decades now. And every time we do the forecast for 2021 or the next year and the next year, each and every forecast that I recollect has always painted such a blooming, dooming, bad picture that says the worst is yet to come. And ironically, I don't see any shortage of incidents, events, or forecasting bad news even into the next decade. And unfortunately, it's not just the vendors that you mentioned, but it's a ripple down effect, especially when you have vendors that are impacted. I won't call it a monopoly, but that are they're close to a monopoly in certain industries, right? So they're very well seated throughout not just the MSP, but into large mid-market and enterprise networks. And anytime that you have somebody get in through an Easter egg or a back door or whatever you want to call it, you know, they now have escalated privileges and pivoted off into other applications, other networks. And I think there's been a few experts and veterans that have been hinting around about it, that you've only seen the tip of the iceberg related to this whole, you know, SW Orion thing. And in fact, I think 4 more were disclosed yesterday. I think it was Mimecast, Palo Alto, and a few others that are pretty popular throughout this infrastructure. If not, that's about to hit the wire from what I heard late last night. So, but yeah, there's numerous other vendors that are also popular in the MSP stack that are about to be announced or should have been announced early this morning from some intel that I got late last night. So yeah, it's just a matter of time. And it gets back to pretty much the core offering of MSPs. Historically, we've been doing a great job of doing remote IT monitoring. And how do we mandate and enforce replicate not just the IT and network monitoring, but also mandate and enforce the security monitoring of not just all of the assets and critical infrastructure, but the actual technology that we utilize to actually do and perform our daily operations. So it's almost like you have to be monitoring the stack that you're using to monitor. So it's like, you know, and when you think about it, that's what we've started specifically look for. In fact, we've been creating modifications in our technology. If somebody, and I'm just going to pick on a vendor, if you're using an on-prem lab tech, still call it lab tech, whatever it's called now, but you know,
ConnectWise Automate, formerly.
yeah, that's it. ConnectWise Automate. So, you know, it's not just about monitoring the activity that's happening on the actual endpoint or the network or the device, but it's actually monitoring the activity, the parent-child processes of what that actual RMM technology is doing. You know, and doesn't take a genius to figure out if the bad guy gets access to the RMM tool. You know, it's kind of like the keys to the kingdom, and you know, you can issue PowerShell scripts and batch files, and you can do all kinds of neat things or not so neat things. I'll leave it at that for a second.
Well, I mean, this happened, not to single anyone out, but to your point, I think, was it a year and a half, maybe 2 at this point, where somebody had figured out how to backdoor something on the Kaseya RMM platform to like start using workstations that were on the end of an RMM agent as like a crypto mining CPU processor.
Yeah.
Um,
You know, and so I think the vendors are going to it's going to be like a domino effect. It's not even going to be over the next couple of months. I think you're going to see numerous vendors. I mean, I'm talking dozens and dozens that continue to announce that say they were impacted. As you know, eventually it comes to fruition. People start disclosing. There's some that are under investigation right now, and unfortunately, there are a lot of tools that are being leveraged, not just in the enterprise space, but that are heavily relied upon in the MSP community as part of what we call that stack. That seems to be the acronym that resonates with everyone throughout the MSP community.
So, wow, that's actually kind of breaking news a little bit, right? I mean, you're telling me there's stuff that should have already been announced or in the process of being announced, vendors in our space, tools that we are all using. So this is imminent, is what it's sounding like.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's going to happen all throughout the year. I mean, it's not even going to be shocking to hear vendors coming up in August, September, and October that says, due to the XYZ breach, we just realized that we were a victim. And then you're going to have legal and law battles, and just it's going to be nasty. And what this means at the end of the day, beyond and above traditional security, is for many customers, they're going to start mandating, you know, significant vendor due diligence. And it is going to lengthen the sales process between an MSP and the actual mid-market customer. Um, and I pick on mid-market customer because they're going to be more likely to enforce, heavy duty vendor due diligence versus the micro small business, which they just need traditional IT help. Um, but the guys that are between those 250 to 1,000 endpoints, kind of that mid-market, if you will, they're definitely going to start putting in some barriers and roadblocks, which eventually it makes everybody lift cost. Um, Show me your SOC audit, show me your CMMC reports, show me your pen test. And we're already starting to see signs of that from certain markets, but it's just going to get heavier and heavier and heavier right now.
So your position is that the MSP going in to potentially prospect somebody new that they haven't done business with before is going to have to either be proactively presenting this information, or they're going to be challenged for it as a criteria to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. We're actually starting to see it now, just even in its early infancy stages. We have MSPs asking us, or basically communicating to us now, that says our prospects and our customers are now asking us who is monitoring our MSP network and our MSP set of tools, given the fact that they're all reading the headlines on CNN and Fox and so on and so forth. And so,
Correct.
I can't recollect. I don't know if it's CompTIA, MSP Alliance. There's a number of these guys that create these certifications, and certification's one thing, but actually showing, some type of evidence, whether it's a monthly monitoring report from a third-party NOC, third-party SOC. Yeah, it's made our business grow exponentially. I mean, we've probably, I'm not going to say doubled, but definitely in the past 2 months since this news, it's been pretty close.
Wow. So in a sorts, to boil it down, this is almost like a MSP credit monitoring report for, like that you would get, right? It's like, hey, yeah, I'm good. My credit's good. I have a high score. I don't have any outstanding debt, but just from a technology standpoint.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head. In fact, I was talking to one of my best friends and told him, I was like, I can tell you what's going to evolve out of this is there's going to end up being a FICO score for the MSP community. It's exactly what you just said. And I told him that last night. And I was like, you watch, somebody exactly like FICO is going to tap into this. Because think about it, anytime there's an epidemic or a problem in any industry, there's always somebody on the other end that's going to monetize or capitalize on that
Oh,
issue.
of course. I
And
mean, listen, you've seen it with the pandemic with, people flipping from I can't have people in my restaurant to I'm delivering like crazy just to keep the doors open. I mean, people have actually done very well, and you've seen breweries flip into making hand sanitizer because nobody could get it, right? I mean, everybody's looking at the opportunities presented, because otherwise, what are you going to do? Wait? I mean, you can't do that. But this is something that isn't even a really clear, obvious one. This is something where somebody's going to come in and have to be believed, right? Accredited, or like one of the reasons why the whole credit agency thing works, although a lot of people think that it's not fair, is that everybody believes the top three companies out there that do it, right?
yeah,
Even on the small business side, right? There are companies outside of those three: Experian, TransUnion, Equifax, or whatever it was. There are even business monitoring ones like Dun& Bradstreet, stuff like that. So do you think a new player comes out to be the MSP FICO score, or is it going to be a familiar name if you had to put your bet on the table?
yeah, I think I don't think it's going to be somebody like an Experian or, no, I take that back. I think that they do eventually adopt all of those specific names that you mentioned. They've been stepping and crossing the boundaries into the cyber liability space, which tells me that they have a roadmap. But as far as getting to market, we'll call it, in this whole cyber hacking game, whatever you want to call it, specifically in the niche market for MSP/SMB community, we're probably, a little fly on the wall, so that they probably don't even know about us. So, I mean, these guys are focused on consumer historically, and now they're offering commercial grade enterprise services, You have companies like AIG that are very well familiar with the SMB space and the MSP community. So it wouldn't take much for those guys to put an effort or emphasis. My gut feeling is you'll probably see somebody more like a CompTIA that steps in, or one of the large vendors that already has a hold or a footprint inside of the industry where it may complement their business strategy. That would
But
be,
but Billy, let's
yeah,
whether they admit it or not,
yeah,
when you go to apply for car insurance or
yeah.
homeowners insurance and the stuff that everybody has to deal with every day, at least here in the US, they're checking your credit score. I don't know why that matters. I would think like how many tickets I got and how many accidents I got are probably more important for car insurance, but apparently FICO score is important to them in their calculation, their algorithm, whatever it is. At what if this FICO score for MSP health and security and vendors and all, like, let's call it your housekeeping for lack of a better term, becomes a numeric field, a numeric generated number? At what point does the insurance carrier business come in and start hooking into that?
No, I think they're obviously looking into that. Even I recall, my previous startup, we started tapping into the insurance vendors before cyber insurance became cyber insurance,
Mhm.
and it was hard for them to create a number because they had no intelligence of the risk. And eventually, you're now starting to see the technological components of what we call what's the security hygiene of a customer, and should that impact the actual weighted monthly premiums to that cyber. You can't
Mhm.
just say, hey, if you want $10 million of insurance, your cost is $100. But customer B over here is 10 million because we know they have malware every day, or they've got backdoors, they don't have firewalls, whatever it may be. So, and today they've tried to cookie cutter everything because it's based on volume that says, you know what, everybody's cyber insurance is $29, regardless if you're secure, if you're not, until you lift the covers of that policy and you figure out that you really don't get anything, unless you've validated, all the line items in order to adhere to that policy. You know,
Hmm.
it's there's some
There, there,
scary.
there's a lot of strings all of a sudden that start to come together here as we're going down this path.
Yeah. So yeah, too many cases I've been involved with on the technical side of things where the small business customer had cyber insurance, but
Mhm.
never received a dime because there was always one got you that says you're only going to get paid back if you can prove X, Y, and Z. And of course, there was some security control or there was something that was not met. So therefore, they never received their $500,000 ransomware payment insurance. Uh,
Wow.
it happens all the time. And, it's every technical incident that we're involved in, we don't typically get into those questions, but later, typically a month or 2 months down the road, we hear the full story about whether cyber insurance was part of the equation or not. So my
Hmm.
last 2 cents on that topic is be careful what kind of insurance package you're getting. So make sure it's, when something bad does happen, make sure that you're going to be able to click a button and automatically get that money without having to go through an act of Congress or to the White House to get your money. So, yeah.
Wow. We definitely don't want to have to go sit in line at the White House to go get money because nobody can. There's a big army around it.
There's,
Uh,
there's a big line. There's a long
there's
line
a lot of
there.
people with a lot of guns around there. Okay, so really intriguing. We went down a road I never expected to be in this part of the conversation, but let's just think about this for a second.
Yeah.
So if the MSP has to protect themselves to make sure that their upstream vendors selection and they can prove that they're in good shape and all that jazz, and at what point, how deep is the MSP into the end customer's insurance carrier, giving them what they need, right? Like the MSP themselves has to be protected. The end customer also needs to be protected. Your insurance policy directly as an MSP doesn't just usurp your end customer, right? I mean, they have to be covered too separately. So how deep does the insurance carrier of your end customer now get and start questioning you as their vendor?
Yeah, I think that that's a valid concern, but you keep in mind everybody's got their top 10 priorities that consume all of our responsibilities. where does that fall? Probably not
Not high. Yeah.
not high. So it is a valid bullet, but it's doesn't make the priority list in the near term. So that would be my response.
Okay. So in 5 years from now, all these things are probably already pretty mature, right? I mean, we're in the very, very early stages of this whole thing.
Well, I thought about that 2 or 3 decades ago when I first became a firewall engineer in 1995. I thought cybersecurity would be mature in 2000. So look where we are. And we think we're getting more mature by the day. And it's either A, we're getting mature, or B, the bad guys are getting better. And I think you definitely have to bet on that latter. So the bad guys are getting better and they're never going to stop. My position is every time we create some type of preventative type solution that does X, Y, and Z, that puts up the fence and the roadblock. It's like Trump. He puts in the wall on the border of Mexico, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what? Now they're going to dig a tunnel, or they're going to jump, or they're going to put up a ladder. People are always going to find a way around prevention. That's it.
100%.
And
Yeah.
and people need to have that mindset. So, even when the next generation fence that comes out next year, uh, they're still going to find a way around it. Then you'll have next gen 2, and then they'll still find a way around it. So, it's
It's definitely a chess game, right? There's no one size fits all.
yeah.
So okay, so let's get back to
FICO.
no, I'm zooming out. I'm thinking, look at all this stuff that an IT service provider has to do on a regular basis. This security game is like its own chessboard on top of the normal day-to-day stuff that's happening, right?
Yeah. Yeah, let me just step back. So when we first started RocketCyber, we had this goal that we were just going to be a bunch of security veterans and a bunch of developers, that we were just going to develop software.
Mm-hmm.
And we just wanted to create this software as a service that fit really nice in the MSP community, that detected all of this stuff that should not be going on throughout the network, right? Stuff. I'll just keep it at stuff at the moment. And what we found is the MSP community really loved it, but they could not decipher it because there's so much threat telemetry coming in from logs and AVs and mail protect, all the different layers, that we're deploying out there to deter adversary activity, or basically help, get the bad guys from focusing on my, fleet of customers. Go focus somewhere else. If you put in
Mm-hmm.
enough layers, you have that hope or that bet that they're going to go somewhere else, and which many of them will tend to do that. But what they found is, we started pumping in all of this data, and the IT guys that started, deploying this security stuff, they found out it's like, oh my God, this is generating more data, more responsibility, more work. And then not only that, you can't just do it 9 to 5. So when I say I entered the call, it's talking about 24 hours of solid labor. It's like, this has to be a 24-hour operation, continuous eyeballs looking at, as somebody broke into my Office 365, as somebody disabled my AV, or as somebody circumvented, I have disgruntled employees now accessing and creating.
So if your building alarm system only works 9 to 5 and somebody breaks in 1 o'clock in the morning, by the time you come in at 9 o'clock, you're done. Yeah.
So my point was, we had to shut down the software only version. And that's actually how we started, was creating software. And then what we found is, these guys are only working from 9 to 5, 9.
Uh-oh.
Work 7 days a week. So nevertheless, was that my internet that just went out?
Yeah, no, you're back. You're back. Yeah. So you said that you stopped the software only version, and you
Yeah.
decided to go into what sounds to be like a more full service operation.
Yeah, as a full service is 24-hour operation. That's predominantly because we saw that the workload for IT providers It's just not practical to go out and hire a team of FTEs, full-time employees. It's too costly. So that's why we made a shift from a software business to a SOC as a service, leveraging our software platform that we had historically developed. So we continue integrating with the tools and technologies that we all know to love and hate,
Hmm.
PSAs, RMMs, AVs, all the different layers that we deploy to our small business customers. At the end of the day, it generates all this stuff. Who's going to go monitor and sift through all that data? And
Okay, so let me zoom out for a second.
yeah,
Let me try and understand how this works. So you have a bunch of software that you built. I connect all the tools that I'm using to deliver to my customer. I have this bundle of, some people call it tech stack, bundle of software services, whatever. I hook it into your stuff. You start getting all this information sent at you, fire gun style.
yeah,
But then how do you figure out what's important or not, right? Because there's got to be the amount of data that you're generating, like you said, has to be outrageous. I like when I first turned on my first RMM, I got 10,000 tickets in the first day, and I'm like, I don't even know where to start.
yeah, no, absolutely. So when you look at historical SOCs, Security Operations Center, for those people not familiar with that acronym, historically, the majority of them are based on what we call a SIM technology. That stands for Security Integrated Event Management. Those are most common vendors would be like Arc Sites, Splunks, Alien Vaults, those types of products. It typically takes an 18-wheeler to go ship out a box that supports the digestion of logs coming from Windows, the firewall, the AWS, and just every other source, because it's like a brain, but it's a brain that's not trained because you're not feeding in data. When we stepped into the SOC market, we said it's not practical for an MSP to be launching a SOC based on a SIM technology.
Hmm.
I mean, I can't tell you the number of MSPs we work with that almost 90% of their portfolio is a micro business. So
Yeah.
think about, I mean, I have one customer, he literally manages 987 chiropractor offices. Can you imagine shipping a SIM to 987 different offices? It's just not practical. Even if I gave you that technology for free, who's going to operate, who's going to set it up? And at the end of the day, is the SMB customer, are they actually going to pay for it? You know, because
That's the big one. If
yeah,
it's like they don't even think like they look at the number. I remember when this type of stuff was coming back, into they start showing up at the shows and the conferences and the events, talking like 4 years ago.
yeah,
Like you couldn't even start for less than like 5 grand a month, and I was
that's
like, what?
That's
No, not gonna
in,
work.
in fact, AT&T is popular for the mid-market. Dell SecureWorks competes in this market, and their starting price is $4,995 still today. And it takes 30 days on average just to onboard one client. And that dog is just not going to hunt in this MSP SMB space. So we said, all right, so what kind of data do we need to feed the SOC brain? And that's why we said we're going to eliminate the hardware, which is going to reduce the onboarding, and build a cloud platform based on RESTful API integrations
Mhm.
to feed in firewall data. And we're going to remove that hardware barrier of shipping boxes to the customer.
So
Um,
so so okay, hold on a second. So
yeah,
there's no box on the network.
yeah.
How are we collecting all the data then? How do I hook up my Sonic wall
Yeah.
firewall
This,
data?
this is the beautiful thing of this entire story. And actually, before we get into that, so the traditional SOC SIM business, like the AT&Ts and the Dells and these guys,
Mhm.
it's the ones that our MSPs are actually competing against, predominantly on the mid-market or a little bit above the small business. Um, think about this. They're shipping a SIM hardware box on the subnet or that VLAN, and then you have this thing called coronavirus that made all of these employees disappear. So that /24 network has nobody on that network, where they just spent 5 grand a month monitoring a dissipated network where nobody's at. So you have a SOC monitoring nothing because everybody's working from home or the beach or wherever they're at. So in my opinion, I said, all right, we have to eliminate the hardware. And B, we have to leverage what they already have, which is an RMM.
Hmm.
We're going to create an RMM script that basically is going to give us a presence to basically collect all of the data that we need to fuel the SOC operation and the monitoring process.
Hmm.
And because you don't want to go reinvent the wheel for some distribution, so you might as well piggyback with what everybody's already using, that being a PSA and the RMM. So a SOC vendor that doesn't have a very you know integrated approach to those two technologies, it probably going to be dismissed in terms of mass market adoption, if you will.
Hmm. That's interesting. Like, so what so what you're telling me is there's a front door and a back door.
Yeah,
And the back door is my AV vendor, my malware vendor, my UTM vendor, my RMM PSA, my Office 365, basically all these software, my DNS filtering guy, my mail filtering, spam filtering guy, like all these software subscription-based services. You're tying into those vendors on the
yeah,
back
that's
behind the, but then the front door is still some sort of network monitoring, no? Or what how do you figure, how does that factor into the equation?
yeah. So what we have is most of the firewall vendors are now migrating to a RESTful API connection as well that allows us to feed direct. So when you today, I think we're supporting 11 or 12 different firewall vendors, which are pretty much the top popular ones throughout the MSP space. But then there's also vendors that provide no logging, no integrations to the SOC, and those MSPs that are using those vendors, that's a pretty dangerous a component. And not to call out any specific vendor specifically, but the one thing you want to make sure is that they have the capability to integrate with a SOC. Because at the end of the day, if I'm the security engineer and you hire RocketCyber as your SOC as a service, we need visibility and insight into the telemetry.
Mm-hmm.
I can't sift through also what's known as triaging threat events. I can't go through line item and line item to escalate a threat event if I have no insider visibility into it.
Hmm.
So, be careful what devices that you're throwing out on the edge for your firewall protection or your routing if there is no insight or visibility to inspect and monitor it. Uh,
Interesting.
yeah.
So like, is the question to your network, like, is this just firewalls? Is it switching? Is it, you
Switch.
know,
Yeah, switching, routing, the firewall components. Um, it's anything that is inspecting that traffic in line. Um, but I think you're going to one of the fastest growing markets that I've been betting on personally with my own personal money is the DNS space.
hmm.
Uh, I
I
think
thought you were about to say GameStop and AMC.
Well, I was a historical investor at GameStop, but I still don't. I'm not caught up to date there, but nevertheless, that was a bad sale that I made on GameStop 5 years ago. I wish I would have had that stock still. So, but
Yeah.
no, it's DNS filtering. Think about it. All these people, due to the pandemic, are working from home. What's the next best firewalling type technology that we can be deploying to our customers? And that's why you're seeing a massive adoption of vendors like DNS filter, Cisco umbrella. You've got the historical guys from Datto, and I think it's one of his brothers that started up a company called Zorus,
Hmm.
Quad Nines, all of the guys that are doing DNS filtering type stuff. And we always have that love hate relationship with Cisco, but Umbrella is definitely the big giant out there. But there's a lot of growth and a lot of room for these companies like DNS Filter and Zorus and the other guys that are working in that space, especially that are focused in on creating multi-tenant technology, which is a must. You're going to have those other vendors that don't care about this market, and everybody's focused on the top Fortune 500. Um, that dog won't hunt in this market either, as we all know. We've seen those vendors try to come into this market space without multi-tenancy, without integrations into our tools and technologies, and at the end of the day, they disappear after a year. So
Okay. No, this is all
yeah,
I mean, listen, we're literally creating an instruction manual blueprint here. I mean,
Trying.
we're
We should get
trying
paid
for
for
sure. So,
this.
so what seems like, let me come out right and say that uh, a lot of people that we're talking to in the MSP space, IT services space, are winning deals on co-managed, right? They are working with inside IT departments, could be 2, 3 man guys, whatever. They're going after guys who are, embedded in companies as full-time employees, whatever. And they're trying to backfill these guys with technology that they don't even have time to go and research it, right? They're too busy just trying to handle the day to day. So from a multi-tenancy standpoint, how do you help somebody who's in the middle now, right? Hey, I might not be doing full-fledged everything for you IT services. I'm just back, complementing your existing staff. Is there a mechanism so that that scenario can play out or not?
Yeah, I think that my personal opinion and my own perspective of the MSP and any SOC vendor, there always is. I'm a big fan of the word co-managed. I think at some point, I don't want to speculate if anything ever gets 100% fully managed. I don't really see that being a favorable option in the MSP community. I always seeing it being more like a co-managed. And let me tell you what I'm making that claim based on. A is we've been over the last 10 minutes, we've been talking about architecture of shipping appliances and not. Um, Now that we have a pretty good foothold on the architecture on how we're going to collect data, so getting data from the MSP stack is part of the problem, right?
Yeah.
So now I got this influx of data from DNS to AV to mail spam and anything else that gets invented tomorrow. We get this aggregation of telemetry. Now the question is, what do we do with it? Uh, so you're going to have this historical. My partner and I, we started this company 20 years ago, which eventually was bought by McAfee, and it did exactly what this problem is that we're about to talk about, and that's what do you do with the data? And I'm going to introduce the word remediation, which here in Texas, I don't know if you heard this over the past week or not. We don't use the word remediation; we use the word fix. And so
I got that. I
you
got
fix
that.
it. We're fixing to go do something, but we're going to fix your stuff. And I think I'm writing a paper right now. It's on fixing threats. And right now I've documented over 380 wild potential threat remediation possibilities. And so I'm going to break it out by stack. Let's say Azure Active Directory. You got a business email compromise, got somebody from Russia. He's pounding away at one of my customers' tenants and
Mhm.
eventually gets in. What could we have done to prevent that? Or what should we do right now? The obvious is, well, if we go implement two-factor authentication, that would help, eliminate those, right? But what's the problem in the industry is a lot of SMBs look at 2FA and they give you this middle finger and they frown and they're like, that's an extra business process. I'm busy. I don't want to implement 2FA. Well, look at these guys from Russia beating away at your account. You want to change your opinion? Some people are like, no, it's an extra step in my workflow and it's going to cause loss of money. So what's the next best thing we could do? How about Azure Active Directory, you know, conditional access policies, those types of things. So that's a type of remediation. Uh, Other types of remediations that we're all familiar with, applying a patch, but what about modifying registry key values? If we see, weird inbound SQL or RDP connections, what about terminating either A, the network connection, or B, terminating the process? What about using your DNS filtering for the SOC to be able to post a block from the destination or origination? So these are sample remedies that I'm talking about. Being able to do a post in a firewall policy, if in fact it's on the network, which today nobody's on the network. But these are just sample things that I'm talking about. There's literally hundreds and hundreds of things. And I think this is where the SOC market eventually gets to, and it's applying the remedy based on a threat. It's not just
Okay.
getting the data and sending a ticket. So,
I mean, listen, I think, I tell my people all the time matters. Uh,
mhm.
it's not necessarily what you're doing, it's when it's done, right? I
Yeah,
mean, if you don't, if you, if you didn't turn the alarm on, somebody came and and robbed the place, then it would have been nice if you had pressed the go button and then ahead of time, right? I mean, time matters. So it's interesting, there's so many different angles, right? There's no one road to fix it all. I mean, there's best practices for sure, but everybody's system is just slightly different, right? So I'm curious, I'm curious how those types of recommendations, those 300, 400 things that those categories you started to filter down on, does this, as a SOC vendor, have access to make changes, or are they just providing you the guidance on what to do and then you have to go implement?
yeah, that right there is probably one of the big differences among many SOCs. So, and there's typically 4 or 5 SOCs throughout the MSP community. They're somewhat fairly known. Some of them just collect data and provide guidance. Uh, Others are going to be collecting data and starting to provide remediation. There's no vendor that can apply 100% threat remediation. And that's why you're always going to, that's why I get back to the original conversation. That's my basis or claim to state that there's always going to be co-managed. I don't have access to your DNS. So, but what I can do is I can give you remediational guidance that says here's step by steps on how to make a DNS configuration change. I'm talking about a different type of DNS right now, not DNS filtering.
Yeah.
Um,
So, by the way, Brian, who just chatted in, SOC Security Operations Center, it's kind of like knock. We could take the N away, that's S security.
yeah,
They're taking all those security events and trying to figure out what to do with them. And then Darren actually chimed in here and said, "Hey, if you guys are going to come up with a DNS filter solution, we're happily trying to replace what we have." So, how much of what you're doing is creating answers on your own versus tying into third-party vendors that are already doing it?
yeah, that's great. So probably 50-50 right now. So we've got 50% of our apps that are probably non-dependent on plugging anything. And the reason is because we didn't see any solution. So right now we built our own TCP UDP inspection that monitors all network connections on the endpoint. And then what we do is we go and we do a lookup on threat reputation to figure out, yeah, I see Sally communicating to some site over in Russia. Well, we want to do a DNS lookup on the site in Russia to figure out, hey, is that thing known for hosting bot, Zeus, distributing malware? And then that helps us make a decision whether we want to isolate that device, terminate the network session, whatever action it may be, right? So we've developed apps like that. We've also developed our own breach detection app that aligns with the MITRE attack framework that was specifically to identify attackers evading AV, very similar to like a Huntress type technology. And then we also developed our own Bitcoin mining app that for detecting Bitcoin mining activity that happens through the browser,
Hmm.
the network protocol, and it also identifies Bitcoin mining at the local client. The reason we did that is not to identify employees that are looking to make some side cash, which is where most of the activity comes from, especially during the pandemic, but because it serves as a backdoor for just nasty .dll or bad file executables and any other type of Trojan malware type activity, if you will. So, and we wanted to have insight who's still in the corporate resource. In fact, we found this one. This is such a funny story. We had this one guy, small business, and their electricity bill increased to around $800 or $900 a month. And depending on the state or county that you're in the US, the utility company is required to contact the FBI if you see a significant spike. And it was,
Really? For what? What are you, marijuana house? What's the deal?
they thought they were growing marijuana in a small legal firm, and it was the secretary of an attorney's firm that we were monitoring with the MSP. And we saw this Bitcoin activity, and it was like literally bringing the network down to a crawl. And they thought they were growing pot. And so it,
Imagine a SWAT team rolling in to a lawyer's office.
yeah, no, they were freaking out. And it was the utility company. I guess there's some type of law I wasn't aware of that if you see a significant percentage in spike, maybe they thought it was the pink or the yellow lights growing the farm, right? So
That's wild.
yeah, no,
That's
it was really funny. But at the end of the day, circling back around on the co-managed, we really position it where we're security engineers working for you guys, and it's a team effort. And at the end of the day, you know, in some cases, we have to make that phone call to you, and we need to work together to go get that kernel level driver off that box, those BB scripts that were downloaded that the AV missed, deleted, whacked. Let's vet. So it's a team effort to be able to work on some of these things on just this bad stuff that happens.
is there, so to that point, right? Like
Yeah,
I'm an MSP. I give you API access to all these vendor accounts that I'm tied into, right?
yeah,
You start doing what you do, right? The wheels start spinning, the scripts start running.
yeah,
I assume that there's an initial cleanup process that happens in the first several weeks, right? Where it's like, hey, I just
yeah.
took all this data in, and you got some stuff you need to do right now.
Yeah, no, it typically happens. You know, when somebody typically starts up with us, they'll go deploy 5 or 10 devices, and they're like, "Oh man, look at this PowerShell script making a connection out to Brazil." Or you know, you always uncover something. The things we always uncover are old scheduled task of, you know, there's a scheduled task trying to authenticate to one of the financial or map drives, and it's creating all these failed logins, and people are like, holy shit, somebody's attacking me. And it's like, no, it's a failed login coming from a map drive with old credentials. So you have things that are definitely can be cleaned up. um, you know, you have people where historical MSPs were on site, so they may have loft password cracker left behind, and you know, that's doing scheduled jobs of running password audits. I mean, we see it all, you know.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's there's always that cleanup in those first 30 days. And then you also have reminiscence of, you know, just bad stuff on the network that's also conditional based attacks. So like a lot of times something bad may actually be on the network, but you're never going to find out until a condition is met. So let's say I've got some script on the network that says only do something bad when
Yeah.
somebody opens Microsoft Excel with macros enabled. That's
Mm.
what I mean by a conditional attack. So you're never going to have insight and visibility until that condition is met. So therefore, I'm a big believer in moving. I don't want a demeanor project based assessments because they are required and there is a necessity, but we have to shift our mentality and thinking that says a one-time snapshot is like a Kodak camera doing a photographic illustration that says my security was X last year or last quarter. We have
Yeah.
to move to a continuous cybersecurity monitoring approach, which really NIST, you know, CompTIA, SANS, and all the governing bodies and training institutes, they're all recommending, and rightfully so. We have to do continuous monitoring. The good thing is that resonates very well with this market and this industry because they're doing continuous network monitoring. Now we just need to add that little forgotten thing called security monitoring to that and make sure that it's not 9 to 5.
No, 100%. So here's the big question on all this. Sounds like this is one way or another, it's coming. You better, start, all the MSPs out there need to figure out how to implement and get it out there and educate their customers. There's still a math problem, right?
Yeah.
Where does how you talk to a lot of guys all day long. You're servicing a lot of IT providers out there. How does this fit from a pricing perspective? How do you go to your customer and say, "Hey, Mr. Customer, I'm putting my hand out for more because where does that? I know everybody's going to set a different price because they're in different markets and they have different agreements and they have different customers. I mean, but where's the median price point here? How much should the MSP, when they're implementing a SOC, increase or decrease their price? I would say I gotta assume it's increasing price.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a great topic. We've had probably hold a call just on this topic alone, but you made a comment that the SOC you you became aware of a few SOC vendors maybe 3 or 4 years ago that stepped into the MSP community. Some of them they're not even they can't even be adopted due to the price point. It's you cannot come in here with a Dell SecureWorks type price model and implement a minimum 5K price for to get started. It's
No way.
not gonna be
Not
adopted.
unless you're dealing with strategically large organizations, and even
Yeah,
then,
or even a credit union that might have 200 employees. So, which many MSPs that are always going to have 2 or 3 customers that fit above those, you know, north of 100 endpoints. But that is taking a model that I really don't believe that we should be adopting. Is taking SOC or security operations and trying to figure out how do we go upsell that. My position on it is almost think of it like the RMM. It's like, how do we sell RMM? Do we sell RMM as a separate add-on price? You
no.
don't. The thing is you cannot afford not to be doing security monitoring 24/7. It has to be baked in to the models. And if if Acme Dental is not going to accept my monthly MSP service offering and it does not include security, I don't want that customer. I mean, how can you accept the risk? You know what's going to happen. Every MSP I speak with, they're becoming more and more educated on the security issue, even for the non security guys. They know that these guys are going to get attacked. So, why would you sign a contract providing IT services that's going to put you liable? At the end of the day, you're going to be sued, you're going to be out of business. Do you really want that X amount of dollar contract if they're not going to take your recommendation and advice? Plenty of customers out there that is they understand the security risk and they don't want to be the next headline. Now that's easier said than done. I understand that MSPs are trying to grow, and especially some are booming. Others are, trying to battle to get that next customer. Some are battling. So sometimes we compromise and we do what we got to do to win that next deal from an IT contract, right? It's not worth it. If they're not going to take your security package, your recommended price, you have to bake in my opinion, the security operations as part of your pricing, at least on your premium, silver, gold, or whatever plans you happen to call
Yeah, the bronze, gold, silver,
them. Yeah,
platinum, whatever they call
yeah.
it. Um,
You can't afford not to have 24/7 eyes monitoring with all this stuff going on, with all these vendors that you're probably in your stack right now. And actually, the liability is actually great because most likely something in your stack is probably popped right now and you just don't know it, but you're probably about to hear about it.
you already told me it should already be out, so I'm like literally, I got 2 monitors just on news feeds waiting for it to hit here.
Yeah,
Now it sounds like it's coming. So
it's
now
definitely coming. There's 4 popular vendors in the MSP that probably within 36 hours you're about to hear about it.
breaking news, people.
Yeah,
You heard it here first.
yeah.
Billy, how do people find you? Well, where do they get started? How do they learn more? What time investment do they need to put in to figure out what's actually out there? Tell us where to start.
Yeah, I'm so first of all of us are in Dallas, Texas. Most people that know me well. I do reside in Cancun, Mexico now. I've kind of got fed up with politics, so I try to hide and escape the North American life right now. I was thinking, should I go to Canada or Mexico? I don't speak French. I do speak Spanish, so I went south of the border where Corona is safe. And nevertheless, saltwater. But nevertheless, one of those 2 locations, Austin at rocketcyber.com, or you can visit us at rocketcyber.com as well. And then I'm not sure if anybody saw the news, we also released a relationship with PAX 8 this week. So you can also learn more about Rocket Cyber through your PAX 8 community. We really love those guys, known them for a long time. And we've just got to partner together on the support, the marketing side, development side, and just come together in all facets. At the end of the day, help the MSP make money but yet while they're helping provide a secure environment for the small business customer. Um,
100%.
yeah,
100%. Now it sounds like you guys are building a purposely built platform for the guys in the community that we're in. So there's not a lot of people that say that in the security space. I know there's maybe a handful. And yeah, I mean, obviously, this is stuff that if you haven't looked at it, it's time to it's time to start looking. Darren's like, hey man, if you're breaking news, you got to start monetizing these sessions.
yeah, I
Hey,
thought it was already.
I'm a pay it forward guy, Darren.
I may have slipped on a couple of vendors there. I thought they should have already been announced, but nevertheless, it's all going to be public soon anyway.
We'll,
So
we'll we'll push this out as a public service announcement so that people know to brace for impact. It sounds
I'm going
like.
to send you my PayPal. So,
Yeah, there you go. We can do that too. I'm
well,
gonna start a
uh,
new site. Breaking news IT.
yeah,
Billy, I really appreciate you jumping on. Hopefully the weather's nice down in south of the border. I really enjoyed Texas this week, by the way, despite all of the various news things happening. I've kind of shut the news off for a second and just tried to breathe a little fresh air.
yeah,
I appreciate you for coming on. Appreciate you for sharing. I'm excited. I think that the PAX 8 relationship is fantastic. I know there's a lot of big PAX 8 partners out there, and they're a great partner in the community. And I think I really think we hit on something in this session. I think the MSP FICO score is coming at some point. I
yeah,
do.
yeah. No, well, I look forward to the next one, and you guys have a good one. Thanks for the invite.
You got it. Thanks, Billy. Thanks, everyone. Talk soon.
Bye bye.